is Coach Tiffany from the Nashville Chess Center, and I'm giving you my very first ever video chess lesson. When we went on the longest spring break ever, my last day was March the 12th, we had left off beginning our studies of Israel Albert Horowitz. He was a three-time U.S. chess champion, chess author, and magazine owner. He wrote for, he was a co-founder of Chess Review magazine, which was started in 1933. It ran until 1969 when it merged with USCF Chess Life magazine. And then in 1989, Horowitz was inducted into the World Chess Hall of Fame. So the first game of his that I'm going to show you was from the Manhattan Chess Club in the 1930s. He was a regular there. Another player who was a regular there was named Mr. Prop. Prop stands for Professional Rook Odds Player. What that means is that Mr. Prop would always get to take his opponent's rook off the board. So Horowitz is white in this game, and what I want you to do is take away this rook from A1, make him disappear from your chessboard, so that Mr. Prop is already a rook advantage into this game. Now, to make this game interesting, Mr. Prop had another idea. Him and Horowitz played together pretty regularly at these rook odds, but what Mr. Prop wanted for this game was to have the option of having Mr. Horowitz change one of his moves. So what he offered him was $1 for every move that he agreed to change. So they started this game with queen's pawn to D4 for Horowitz, to which black answered knight to F6. And then Mr. Horowitz tried to play E3. But Mr. Prop stopped him. He said, you know what? Capablanca used to play knight to D2 after D4. So if you will take back E3 and instead play knight to D2, I will pay you $1. Horowitz agreed, and he was $1 ahead. So then black responded with E5. Now this, I thought at first was the Budapest Gambit. This was kind of an obscure opening. I studied it a little bit last year. It's a lot of fun for black, and there's a lot of really cool traps involved in it. But when I studied it a little bit deeper, it's actually called the Indian game Lazard Gambit. It was played in 1924 in Paris by a man named Frederick Lazard. But I still think it looks a lot like the Budapest. Now here, Horowitz suspected that Mr. Prop wanted him to take the pawn. So he thought to be clever, he would swindle him out of another dollar. Again, he tried to play E3. To which Mr. Prop replied, no, sir, I will pay you $1 if you will take that move back and instead take my pawn. Mr. Horowitz agreed, thinking himself very smart. He was now ahead $2. All right, so if you're going to play this Lazard Gambit or the Budapest Gambit, where does this knight need to go now to get away from the pawn? G4. Knight to G4. It looks like now he's going to be attacking the E-pawn. So Horowitz tries to defend it. He brings his G knight up to F3. Now here, Mr. Prop wanted once again for Horowitz to change his move. He said, no, I know you want to protect your pawn, but how about I pay you $1 to take back your knight move and instead play rook's pawn to H3. Now, Horowitz was a little confused about this one. He knew he was going to be losing the pawn on E5, but he had already won the pawn from the gambit earlier. So, reluctantly, he agreed and instead played H3. But this is when it gets really weird, because Mr. Prop did not go and take the pawn. See if you can figure out what he did instead. He played knight to E3. Now that does not look safe at all, but it is a death trap. If Horowitz takes the knight, what is going to happen? Mate in 2. This is going to look like a variation of the fool's mate. Queen, h4, check. White would only have one reply to this. He has to block the pawn. There's nowhere for the king to run, and there's nothing to capture the black queen. So when the pawn comes forward to g3, the queen is then going to capture it, resulting in checkmate. Checkmate is when your king is in check. He has nowhere to run, no pieces that can block the check, and nothing that can capture the piece that's checking. Now, of course, we're going to go back to knight to e3 again. Horowitz saw the trap and did not take the knight. Instead, he played knight g to f3. Now, of course, Mr. Prop asked him here if he would take back his move and instead capture the knight, to which Horowitz declined that offer. He said, "No, sir, I would much rather lose my queen than lose my king." So instead, he plays knight g to f3, and then the black knight gets to capture the queen. Now here, Horowitz did capture the knight, so he's giving up his chance to castle as well. But amazingly, Horowitz actually made a comeback. He's down a queen and a rook for a knight here. But against a professional rook odds player, it was still no match. And Horowitz ended up winning the game and a total of $13. They were playing for $10 for the game, plus the $3 for the moves that he agreed to take back and change. Set your pieces. This game is going to be at full strength. We're not going to take any rooks away. This next one's called the Horowitz-Gruenfeld defense. And in this game, we're going to start the same way with pawn to d4. Horowitz is actually playing black in this game. And he starts his opening moves with knight to f6. White follows with c4. And then black responds with g6. This is similar to the King's Indian defense. We're opening up the g-pawn so that we have a nice little hole for that bishop to come out into. White continues with knight to c3. And then black plays d5. The bishop's going to come out a little bit later. All right, now should white take this pawn? He does. To which black responds, capturing back using his lower valued piece, the knight. But white does not continue trading on from here. We're going to be okay if black's knight captures c3 because the white b pawn is going to be able to come towards the center. If we capture the knight with our knight, we're just going to invite his queen out into the center of the board, and she might cause us some problems. So what we're going to do instead is we're going to force him to move the knight again, with white playing pawn to e4. And now the knight chooses to just go ahead and trade off. So Horowitz uses his knight to capture c3, to which white responds, b pawn captures c3. All right, now here we are going to see a gambit. Horowitz plays c5. It looks like a gambit anyways, but who can tell me what is going to happen if this pawn tries to capture the seemingly free pawn? there would be a queen trade. So the black queen would come down and capture the white queen, offering check to His Majesty. The king would then have to capture back, and he's not going to get to castle in this game. If we end up with our king trapped in the center of the board this early on, it's going to be super hard to keep him safe. So instead of taking the pawn, white plays bishop to c4. And then we see that ninja bishop pop out from earlier move g6. We see bishop to g7 for black. Now, I call him a ninja. This guy often, when he's on that fianchetto line, this longest diagonal for the dark squares, he often gets forgotten about. So these three pawns that surround him, I kind of think they're like the bushes and the ninja's hiding within. A lot of players will kind of overlook him, so he can cause you a lot of problems going into this middle game. White's next move is knight to e2. We're just putting extra protection on d5, or d4, excuse me. Right now we've got the bishop, the black pawn, and the black queen all focused on d4. And then how many white pieces do we have keeping it safe? We've got the c pawn, the queen, and now our knight. So black has another attacker that he can add. He brings his other knight into the game, knight to c6. And then white plays bishop to e3, bringing his fourth protector in. All right, now the trade begins, but it's only going to go one take in. The black pawn captures first, c takes d4. And then white takes back using his c pawn also. Now here, black does not want to keep taking. If the knight takes, then the white bishop takes, then the black bishop takes, and all he was able to get was a pawn and a bishop, but he had to give up a knight and a bishop. So instead, he finds sort of a sneaky move that maybe white wasn't anticipating. He finds the check. Queen to a5 check. Now we're on the 10th move of this game, still a little bit early to be bringing your queen out. Horowitz was extremely brave with his queen in this game. We're going to block this check and put pressure on the black queen with bishop to d2. All right, so now think about what the choices for the black queen are going to be. If she stays out over on this queen side of the board, surely more attacks are going to just come her way. I think I would be okay with like queen to c7 here just to kind of keep her active but get her out of the action. But Horowitz goes all in. He plays queen to a3. Now it takes white a few moves to plan this queen trap. What he eventually wants to get is his bishop on b4 safely. That would mean that the black queen would have absolutely nowhere to go. But he's got a few steps that he's got to take before he can reach his goal. The first thing he does is he protects with rook to b1. That's going to guard b4 for when the bishop actually gets there. Now, Horowitz has plenty of time here to stop this from happening, but he just very nonchalantly castles his king as if he's totally ignoring the problem. Now, the next thing that white's going to have to do to make bishop b4 work is he's going to have to remove the defender from that square. The queen, of course, is defending b4, but the knight on c6 is doing it too. So we want a way to kick that knight away. And Horowitz finds d5 to do that job. The knight escapes the attack and moves to e5. And then the inevitable bishop to b4. Now this looks really bad for the black queen. She doesn't have any safe squares to go to. If she goes to a6, the bishop's going to get her. A5, the bishop's going to get her. A4, the queen is going to get her. Capturing the pawn on A2 is protected by the bishop on C4. She can't go to B2 because of the rook, or anywhere else on this third rank. Pawns guarding here, bishops guarding here, bishops guarding here, and then pawns are guarding all of the rest of the row. Horowitz was extremely clever, though. He found a great resting place for her on F3. That is not safe at all. Or is it? White takes the queen, and then black has forced checkmate in 2 moves. First, we're going to take that pawn back with our knight, offering check. This check is also going to guard that D2 escape square, so the white king only has one place to go. F1. And then we're going to wake up that bishop who slept in. He's going to come down and checkmate on H3. Our third Horror-Witz game, we're looking at Ed Lasker, who was a distant relation of the world chess champion Emanuel Lasker. I think they might have been like second or third cousins or something like that. Ed was an international master. I've shown some of my chess clubs a few of his games, usually games where he loses, taking on really tough opponents. And this one's no different. We're going to start with Lasker playing D4. And then Horowitz responds with knight to F6. White goes knight to F3. And then D5 for black. Now white plays E3. And black responds with C5. Now white can take this pawn with his D pawn, but if he does, he's going to end up losing the pawn anyways to this bishop later on. We might see him take here, and then we're going to see E6. We could guard it with B4, but then we're going to have a little bit of an imbalance, and after A5, the bishop's going to end up getting the pawn anyway. So we want to try to keep our center strong and stable, and so we respond instead with C4 for white. Now black does take. He uses his C pawn to capture the D4 pawn. And then white takes back using the knight instead of the E pawn. If we take with the E pawn, then we're going to open up that E file that leads straight to our king, and that's going to cause some safety issues. So always put safety first when making these decisions. Think about your king. Black plays E5 now. He's going to kick our knight out of the center, make us lose a little bit of time by moving the same piece again, and he returns swiftly to F3. Black continues his development with knight to C6, and then white develops his knight to C3. And now Horowitz pushes into the center with pawn to D4. Now we're a little bit closer to castling now, and we don't really have a great place to stick our knight without losing, if he takes us, then we're going to take with the F pawn. So we are going to have to go ahead and trade off our E pawn. With E pawn captures D4. Black is going to open his king up with the same trade. His E pawn captures back. And then Lasker's got to move his knight to safety. If we take this pawn with our knight, we're going to get a pawn and he's going to get a knight. So we're going to lose material if we do that. Instead, the knight runs away to B5. Looks like Stockfish is liking knight to D5 a little bit better here. It would be supported by the pawn and only attacked by the black queen. All right, and then here comes Horowitz's first attack on the king. He brings his bishop down to B4 for a check. We've got a few ways to block this check. We could block it with our knight to d2. We could block it with our bishop to d2. We don't want to use our knight on b5 since black does have that d pawn in the center. So Lasker uses his bishop to block it. This is the piece that isn't doing any jobs yet. So we see bishop to d2. Horowitz castles his king. All right, now white goes and takes this bishop. That is, bishop captures b4. Horowitz captures back using his knight. Followed by knight on b, taking the pawn on d4. Now black develops his queen. Same thing as in the last game. We're going to bring that queen all the way out to a5. It's not going to offer a check in this game like it did in the last game, but we're setting up for a great discovery. We could do knight to d3 double check. We could do knight to c2 double check. Double checks I see as one of the most evil attacks in a chess game because those are the checks that the king has to run away from. You're not going to be able to block two checks at the same time or capture two pieces at the same time. With a knight check, you can't block it anyway. So white tries to block the check before this happens with knight to d2. All right, but the black queen's going to have another way to get her check, even if she doesn't get the discovery check. She goes queen to e5, check. Lasker blocks using his unprotected piece. So we see that the queen is making a fork here. She's attacking the unguarded knight on d4, as well as checking the king. So he tries to save them both with knight to e2, but you can see Stockfish is really wanting us to use that bishop to block because the bishop is no longer protecting the checkmate. Knight to d3 is mate because we have nowhere to run and no way to block a unblockable knight. So, thank you for viewing my chess lesson, chess kids. I hope to see you all back really soon. I miss you terribly. In the meantime, please find me on chess.com. I've created school groups for each of my clubs to try and stay active online. Just search in the clubs on chess.com for your school name. If you don't see it there, shoot me a message and I'll make sure to get one created. And I hope to see you all really, really soon. Take care. Bye.